Walking through central Harare, you might think the economy was booming. But times are hard, and people are selling just about anything to get by. The informal sector has become the country's biggest employer. The government says that's evidence they've delivered more than 2 million jobs.
Well, when we're talking of jobs, we're talking of jobs. The important thing is to create an environment where industries have closed because of sanctions, but people have also opened their small businesses, and we've encouraged that.
The days of sky-high inflation and trillion-dollar banknotes may be over, but industry and investment in Zimbabwe have collapsed, forcing the country to import nearly everything. And that's caused cash to hemorrhage out of Zimbabwe. Enter the bond note. Last year, the Zimbabwean government issued bond notes as a way to ease the cash crisis. Now, technically, it's not an official currency, but its value is pegged to the US dollar. The new notes have been useful for now. Their value hasn't nosedived because there's not enough notes around. But that's another problem. Zimbabweans queue outside ATMs for hours to get a daily allowance of just $50. And for shopkeepers like Beloved, bond notes can't be used to import goods.
My goods, they are from South Africa. If I get the bond note, there is no way I can find the rand. I'll just have to go to the black market.
In Harare, the black market is out in the open. Money changers on the street sell all kinds of currencies for a commission. But the real business here is access to valuable US dollars collected for the boss at the end of the day. Are you under pressure to sell all of it?
I'm working for someone. Yeah.
And the 5% commission goes to you?
No, me I get maybe 1% and I give the other percent to the owner of the money.
There's been some good news. After years of drought, winter rains brought a bumper harvest this year. So big, we're told, that storage silos in the countryside are all full of maize. For the first time in decades, Zimbabwe might have grown enough grain to feed its people.
The future for us in Zimbabwe belongs to agricultural transformation. We want to reclaim our breadbasket status. We've done that with just one good season and better planning through our command agricultural policies. We have been able to surpass even our own expectations.
But critics say the volume of grain grown in Zimbabwe has been distorted.
They've set the price of maize in this country at double the international price. That's messed things up enormously because it's encouraged people to import maize to sell to the local government authority, which is paying this price, which is double the international price. And so a lot of the maize arriving was not grown in Zimbabwe.
Still, the agricultural boost may help the economy grow by 1.3% this year. But good rains alone won't create enough jobs, and bond notes won't save the economy. The International Monetary Fund says Zimbabwe's rescue plan needs to be more ambitious than that. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers, Harare.
Well, joining me now from Harare is Tapiwa Mashakada. He's the opposition MDC's Secretary for Finance and Economic Affairs, and at one time was the government's Minister of Economy. Great to have you on the program, sir. There was a Bloomberg article about your country saying death spiral looms for Zimbabwean economy as cash runs out. Is it that bad?
Yeah, the cash situation is still a problem in Zimbabwe. As you have rightly mentioned, we are now using what we call a bond note currency, which is theoretically indexed to the US dollar, but you cannot use it outside the country. It can only be used in Zimbabwe, but its circulation is restricted because it has been issued by the Reserve Bank as a so-called export incentive facility for all exporters. So it's not generally easing the currency shortages because its supply is restricted to an export incentive. Therefore, the liquidity crisis is continuing under the circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, we experimented with the use of the multi-currency system, which was anchored by the US dollar. But in recent years, we've seen the flight of the US dollar from the monetary system due to externalization and illicit financial outflows. So that led to really a fiscal crisis and a monetary crisis, which triggered the issuance of the local bond notes.
Right. The economy has been in trouble for the best part of 15 to 17 years. Now, the situation is not the same as, I guess, peak economic catastrophe with hyperinflation of 2008, but the situation is bad. If I asked you, whom do you blame? Is it Robert Mugabe and political negligence that has led the country to where it is right now economically?
Well, to begin with, the current situation is the opposite of the situation in 2008. Whereas we had hyperinflation in 2008, now we've got deflation, which means it's a situation where we've got a very low inflation rate, but aggregate demand is depressed. There's no economic activity. Therefore, you've got sort of too much goods now chasing too few cash. That's the opposite of what was happening in 2008. Essentially because the economy is not growing right now. The growth rate is about around 2%. And we don't have sufficient levels of FDI to kickstart productive activities in manufacturing, mining, and other productive sectors.
And one of the reasons why people, sorry to interrupt you, one of the reasons why people don't want to invest in the country is because there's a 93-year-old president who wants to hold on to power for much longer. Is the political situation feeding into the economic crisis?
Well, the political situation in Zimbabwe is now a broken record. We are in the international media. We've been in the national media for quite a long time, and the crisis, political crisis, seems not to be going away. The implication of the political impasse is that it has translated into a confidence crisis in Zimbabwe, where everybody has adopted a wait-and-see attitude as the protagonists try to solve the political puzzle.
As a man who was at the table and somebody involved in these economic matters, something I hear a lot from defenders of President Mugabe and those who feel that the international community, those in the outside world, have been unfair towards him and his rule. A lot of them say it's the sanctions by the UK, the US, the Europeans and other international institutions which have helped contribute to economic depression. As somebody who knows the situation inside and out, were the sanctions a factor at all, and are outsiders to blame at all?
Well, it's very clear that sanctions is one of the factors that have affected the performance of the economy, but it doesn't explain the meltdown entirely. Some of the problems that have led to the meltdown has to do with our own lack of good governance, especially on public and financial management. I'll tell you, the issue of corruption has nothing to do with sanctions. We lost about 15 billion from our diamond sector in corruption. And you cannot say this has anything to do with the sanctions. Our indigenization policy, which says 51% of all investment has to be locally owned, again, has also raised issues from investors. So it's not just sanctions which has affected our performance.
Tapiwa Mashakada, it's been a pleasure talking to you.